YouTube? Today I'm going to be going over what a lot of people have been asking for, which is how are you supposed to level up an ore stacker from League launch. And I actually tested out playing with SRS a little bit, and it felt just a little too bad in terms of doing the beginning acts, so it probably will not be a playstyle that I will be doing. And if I'm going to be playing an ore stacker in the beginning, I'm going to be trying to level up with Armageddon Brand, because Armageddon Brand is just miles faster than SRS, and I don't even know how viable SRS is for leveling for the first few acts until you get the minion damage nodes, because honestly it felt pretty bad. But I do think once you get the minion damage nodes and you have the tree set up, then leveling with SRS is probably a viable option. But if I was to choose one, I would definitely play Armageddon Brand into Archmage Storm Brand, and it should be a pretty smooth transition, and it should allow you to farm most of the gear that you will need in order to transition to the ore stacker. So I wanted to go over pretty much the Armageddon Brand leveling tree, the links you have for the campaign, and what you should look out for. And I'm going to include this pub in the description so that everyone can see exactly what the leveling experience is and what gem links you actually need to have. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the leveling and what you should expect for the leveling tree and what skill gems you will need. So the leveling tree looks a little bit like this. So it literally looks like you're trying to get all of the life and fire damage nodes, and this is pretty much just one way of doing it. So at the league start, you pretty much just want to make a bum rush to elemental overload as fast as possible, and this is because this is pretty much a 40% more damage multiplier. And then you don't want to take these nodes at the start. You want to just go through here, get the fire damage or lightning damage node. You additionally want this thing. Initially want this thing because you're going to be leveling with Orb of Storms and Stormblast Mine at the start. But you will use Frost Bomb and Orb of Storms, and then you will just throw Stormblast Mines on top, and that should help you out a lot for leveling. And it's actually by far the fastest. And once you get the heralds at around level 18, a herald of ice, herald of thunder, it will feel really smooth. Now in another video I talked about the most OP way of leveling, and it is to use a wand craft. And the wand craft is to use a magic wand and then a topaz ring or sapphire ring or ruby ring along the alt. And the level of the wand craft depends on the rarity of the ring. So if you have a rare ring, it's like level 22. A magic ring is level 14, and I think a white ring is level 8 or something. But that's basically the way you want to approach leveling. Make sure you get like one spell damage craft on your wand, or flat damage to spellcraft on your wand at like level 8 before you do Merval, and then you can do the rest of the wand crafts later on after you complete Act 2. Or if you want to have a really big boost, you can craft one wand during Act 2 of a magic ring. But basically, that should carry you through around like level 28. So at that point, you should probably fill out around like this part of the tree. Get right here, you would have Lightning Walker, and then you'll probably start making your way to Dark Arts and take this node. Now Dark Arts is pretty necessary because leveling with like low cooldown recovery on your movement skill feels really bad, and this gives us a lot of cooldown recovery on the movement skill, and it also gives us some cast speed, which is really nice. You could also, if you want it to be really speedy, you could also take these two nodes for some 4% move speed and also some spell damage while dual wielding. But basically that's not really needed. But once you hit level 28, it's pretty much the promised land. That's when you can put in Armageddon Brand and the whole game becomes a complete joke. So Armageddon Brand, you want to be using the wand crafts with flat fire damage to spells. So here you have Armageddon Brand, you want Swift Brand, you want Combustion, you want Conk Effect, Control Destruction, Arcane Surge as your links. You have to make sure if you run Control Destruction that you're able to proc Elemental Overload enough. But generally you'll be on a 4 link, so I probably would just be using Combustion and Swift Brand and Conk Effect. Could also throw an Arcane Surge if you wanted to, but they're all extremely good links. And then your single target setup will be Cremation. You want GMP or LMP depending on when you get it. You want Pinpoint, and then you want Elemental Focus, or you can use Conk Effect instead of Pinpoint if you don't have the gem yet, because you can get Conk Effect a lot earlier and Elemental Focus. And these are pretty much just the most damage multipliers for the gems, and that's why GG wanted to nerf the gems. But as you can see, you'll still use the exact same support gems because they're just the best for damage. And then you want to have Flame Dash linked to Arcane Surge if you're not using Arcane Surge in your Armageddon Brand link. Also, if you want it to be kind of faster, you could also use Onslaught in the link if you just care about speed and you don't need the damage, and this does give you a 20% movement speed buff. So you have Flame Dash, Arcane Surge, and then you have a Wave of Conviction, which helps you apply exposure. And then you have Hex Touch, so when you use your Wave of Conviction, you'll trigger your Flammability Curse, and then also have Culling Strike for culling. And then your auras you want to run is Summon Skitterbots and Herald of Ash. You can also run another Herald, or you can run Clarity if you run into mana issues because of the increased mana cost of skills. And then that's pretty much it for the, the gem links. So you probably won't have a 6 link, you probably will have a 4 or 5 link. You probably have a 4 link for cremation, and then you should be able to run all this other stuff. So now I want to talk about the ascendancies. For the ascendancies, you want to run a Scion. And then you probably want to take Elementalist at the start, and then you want to take Hierophant. You don't really need to do normal lab right away because normal lab doesn't give you anything. When you do the normal lab, you only get these 2, so you only get like 1 passive point and 40 int, so it's not a big deal. But then you do Cruel Lab, you can pick up Elementalist, and the Merciless Lab, you can pick up the Templar Hierophant part, which should help you out because it gives you increased effect of Arcane Surge, and it gives you some more mana. So basically, you can pretty much finish the campaign just by filling out this tree. You want to get the brand nodes here. You want to rush Runebinder after you fill out this area. Then you can take these nodes, or you can go here, get some life, get some brand duration. Make sure to take this too so you can cast an additional brand. And the leveling experience should be super fast, and you should be done with the campaign in roughly at 4 to 5 hours. And then you get to the point where you want to swap over to Storm Brand. So if you look here in the pop down here, you can switch over the tree to Storm Brand, and then you can see the Storm Brand tree is a little bit different. It is look mostly the same, so you do want to go down here and you just want to take like all of the mana nodes. You won't really need the duration until you use March of the Legion boots, so you could probably leave those out. So basically, Supreme Ego is not really that needed until you get March of the Legion boots, but you pretty much just want to take the mana nodes. The mana nodes here, mana nodes here, mana nodes here. And then you want to take the mana nodes here, and then the mana nodes over here, and the mana node here. So pretty much you just switch out a lot of the fire damage you have and area damage, and you swap it over to mana nodes. And you can pretty much switch over your build to this, and you should be able to afford this with just the respec points you get from the campaign. And you want to switch over your build when you have a Cloak of Defiance, preferably, or 5 linked or something, or you want to have a Xeris Foible for sure, and you want to make sure all your gear has some mana on it, some flat mana and life and resist. And you probably will not go crit right away. This is a crit tree, but you'll probably go Elemental Overload until you can get some better gear, preferably a wand with some spell crit and crit multi, and then some spell crit and crit multi here. Because without crit multi and spell crit, you will be better off with just running a setup with normal Elemental Overload and non-crit. So if you're not going crit multi, you won't need these nodes right here because these are pretty much just brand crit multi nodes. So you could put these points into some generic damage or cast speed or something like that, or more life. Now, a lot of people ask, like, how do you actually increase the damage of the Storm Brand build? Because a lot of people get capped out in damage, right? So you can see the links for the Storm Brand build are you want to use Brand Recall, Sigil of Power, LE Weakness, Hydrospear, Hex Touch. So your Hydrospear will proc LE weakness, and it'll also give lightning exposure. And then you also have Arcane Cloak, increased duration, Arcane Surge. You don't want to use Second Wind anymore because it actually increases the cooldown time. And then you have Haste, Wrath, Zealotry, Malevolence in your boots. So like, you want to get the boots as soon as possible. It will make the playstyle it'll make your damage a lot better as soon as you can get the boots. I'm not really sure how much the boots will be at League Start, but it should be one of the priorities. So I feel like you can swap. You don't need the boost to swap at all. You probably just want to swap when you have a Xeris Foible, a Cloak of Defiance, and then you have theoretically you don't even need the cloak. You pretty much just need some rare gear or some mana, so you can do it with some essences, or you can just set up some live searches for some rare gear with mana on it and life and resist. And it shouldn't be too bad. As soon as you have like 5-6k mana, you should have more than enough damage to do all the content. And then you can also try using an Essence Swarm, and a Malachai's Artifice Ring is also really good, so I do have an option here. So what you do with the Malachai's Artifice Ring is you put in a Flame Golem, and then you can see here you would have enemies hit by fire damage, and you can see the damage goes up a lot because applies elemental equilibrium to single target. So if you ever find yourself with having like low single target, you can use a Malachi's Ring. You do lose a little bit of survivability, but I think the trade-off is worth it. But like I was saying, your Storm Brand skill links will be a little different than before. Before, people always use Awaken, Control, Destruction. Now, if you're going crit, you want to use Critical Strikes, Archmage, Swift Brand, Lightning Pen, and Conk. These are by far the best links, and I don't really think there's anything you can really swap out. So you can see we still have like 82% crit, and this is without using a Bottle Faith or anything, and this is with a Nerf Diamond Flask. Now, what you want to do is, in order to scale the damage, is you always want to scale crit multi, like I said before, for crit builds. So you want to try to get jewels like this. You can see it's lightning and dual wielding, and this gives you 36% multiplier. So you take out this jewel, you can see it's already a 10% damage loss, right? So you get these jewel sockets. You want to put in some multi jewels, so you can get a jewel socket here, jewel socket here, jewel socket here, and a jewel socket here. You could also probably get this jewel socket later on, but jewel sockets are pretty much really strong for the build. Oh yeah, and then you can also make sure to get Supreme Ego once you get March of the Legion. But basically the tree is pretty much a mom tree from before Archmage, and the build is relatively tanky as long as you increase your life pool a little bit. When I was testing it out, I had like 2.6k 2.7k life, and it kind of felt bad, but you could honestly probably just drop Healthy Mind maybe until you had a little better gear, because Healthy Mind lowers your life pool a lot, because you pretty much convert all of the mana nodes into life nodes into mana nodes, and sometimes you just don't have the life pool to do that. So, and then for this jewel, like this does give you 13% DPS, but if you just replace this Healthy Mind jewel with another multi jewel, you can see that the damage is not really that different, and you are actually a lot tankier in terms of EHP. But overall, build is very solid to play. If you want to see some content, you can also look at the YouTube video in my description. I did test all of this out, and it does seem to be relatively pretty similar playstyle.
Can I not have but a moment?
There is one thing to discuss, which is your ascendancy choice. When I was testing it out, if you don't want to use a mana flask, because the mana flask is actually pretty severely nerfed, and if you don't have any flask effect nodes, then you could theoretically just play with Raider, but you would have to make sure that you don't like spam brands, because a lot of people play Storm Brand, they like cast brands over and over again. But the fact is that your brands actually last not... How long does the brand actually last for? Does it actually say here? Yeah, the brands actually last for 6.84 seconds or 3.33 seconds. So they last for a good amount of time. So when you boss, you can not cast it that much. But if you do get hit, your mana regen is going to take a hit though. So it's kind of hard to say if you should run Pathfinder or you should run Raider. But either is fine. Preferably, if you were probably doing some hard bossing, I would do Pathfinder. But if you're just mapping in general, at the early start, I would go Raider, because it's a lot more clear speed, and you have Onslaught, and you get Frenzy charges, and you have phasing. So it's a really strong node. So you could go Raider and Hierophant, and then when you do hard content with bosses and you need the flash regen, you would go Hierophant and Pathfinder. But this build should be able to do everything in the game. I think you can do the fear too. You might need to upgrade your gear a little bit, but everything should be doable, and you should be able to use the build, and the gear is relatively affordable, and you can start saving up the Aura Stacker gear and eventually transition to Aura Stacker, because Aura Stacker is, I feel like, the best build in 3.15, like I said. And after putting in some PoE ninjas, like say like some people with Spark, right? I put in someone's profile of 80 million Spark DPS, and it's only at 64 million now, but 64 million is only a 20% damage nerf, and that's actually like a robbery pretty much in terms of what the Aura Stacker got away with, because we are actually barely nerfed. So for the transition, you want to be Armageddon Brand at the start. You buy the core uniques of Asenaths. Asenath should be one of the biggest purchases you go early game, because it actually increases your clear speed really fast. But you do want to buy Foible, you want to buy a Cloak of Defiance if possible, and you want to get some rares with life and mana, and then you can swap over to Archmage Storm Brand. And it should be very smooth leveling, and you should feel relatively tanky once you get all of the mana regen and agnostic. Now I wanted to talk quickly about the other option and what I will actually personally be playing in 3.15. I'm going to be playing my friend, and he's going to be playing the new skill called, what's it called? Like Toxic Storm Rain, right? Or Storm Rain Path of Exile. I don't even know what it's called. It's the new Storm Arrow ability that does the chaining between when you have a bunch of arrows, and you can have 100 arrows in the ground. So if you have a friend, and I'll be doing a fleshed out version of this build tomorrow, I recommend you do an Aurabot SRS build. But I think in terms of like the general smoothness, I think Armageddon Brand into Storm Brand Archmage just beats out the playstyle. But theoretically, if you wanted to do SRS, you could probably just level as Storm Brand or Armageddon Brand at the start, and then once you get to 38 and you can get Unleash or something, then you could use this SRS Aurabot thing. So SRS Aurabot, you do have all of the stuff in the staff. You have multi-strike, summon raging spear, elemental proliferation, unleash, awaken minion damage, and elemental damage of attacks. But I think there's a lot of different gems you can use, so you could probably experiment with it in POB. I don't really know how much this build is nerfed by, but I'm just giving you guys a heads up is that this is the other option. This is actually the option I will be playing, because this option allows you to be pretty much an Aurabot, and you get the staff, which actually gets auras from your skills, grant 4% increased damage to you and allies. So your allies will actually love you because you actually give them a lot of damage. So then you pretty much have an amulet with RMR. So this is pretty much an amulet that you would use for aura stacking. I don't know if you can see it right here. But then you have some unset rings. Your gloves will just be an ES gloves. Boost will be Syntrek, which is what an aura stack would actually use early game. And then you would use a Darkness Enthroned or Crystal Belt, and then you would use Victario's chest. But basically, if you're going to be playing with a friend, you can do an Aurabot, and then if you friend is not always online, you can be an Aurabot SRS character, so you can actually play the game while they're at work or at school or something like that or whatever. So there's pretty much like two options, I believe: the Aurabot option and then the Archmage Storm Brand option, and then both of them will eventually transition to Aura Stacker Spark. And again, this is only for people who want to play an Ascendant, because people who play an Ascendant are probably wanting to be an Aura Stacker. There are probably better builds out there for League Start for other Ascendancies. Like I know a lot of people like Ice Trap Saboteur. So if you want to play another Ascendancy, that I would not. If you want to just play the best League Starter, then I would probably recommend a different build, because this is purely for doing an Aura Stacker later on, and if you like playing an Ascendant. But I also believe that Stormbrand Archmage is a very, very strong build, and it could get you pretty far in the league. But I hope that answers most of the questions about the build, because I know a lot of people had questions about how to level it, and I went through the process of how you would progress the character, the tree, and what you should actually do to maximize your damage, which is always going to be getting the crit multi higher. And you can see the gear for this build is relatively affordable. Besides Asenath is probably the thing that stands out the most as being the most expensive. But everything else should be relatively obtainable, and you'll be able to do all of the content really easily. Your character should be relatively tanky, and yeah, you should be able to just face roll the content. And Archmage gear should be relatively cheaper, because a lot of people think it's nerfed to the ground, but maybe once they see the POB numbers, they'll realize that if you just switch around the support gems, Archmage is not really nerfed by that much, and it's pretty much the same as any other build. But hopefully this guy helped out everyone, and I hope everyone has a good league start. But tomorrow I'll be doing the Aurabot SRS guide, and I'll go over the tree and everything. Oh yeah, and for Pantheons real fast. Pantheons always take Soul of the Brine King, and I took some physical damage reduction. And I should have probably included that earlier, but yeah. But if you like the content, be sure to like and subscribe. I do try to stream every day, and I will be doing a build diary during the league launch that will be updated daily. So thank you everyone for watching, and I hope you find more mirrors and exalts than I do, and see you next time.